My name is Nova, I'm 34 years old and I live and work in Austin, Texas. After spending a week at an architecture conference in Seattle, I came home feeling excited, only to freeze in place right on the sidewalk. The house I had designed myself, saved every penny to own, now had an open house sign stuck in the front yard. Strangers were walking in, flyers in hand, inspecting every corner like they were about to make an offer. And my mother, who once told me she hated everything about this house, was smiling and showing them around like a seasoned real estate agent. Have you ever had your parents quietly take everything from you without even asking? If you've ever found yourself in a situation where your family crossed the line, share it in the comments. Like and subscribe to the channel to join me in uncovering the unbelievable story behind this. How I fought to take back control of my own life. I slammed the door shut after the last visitor walked out. My heart was still pounding like I had just woken up from a bizarre dream. I looked around my home. Every brick, every corner, every light bulb had been chosen by me. Now it felt like a display piece, open for others to evaluate, to claim. The feeling of being violated crept into every fingertip as I gripped the stair rail just to steady myself. I turned to my mother. She was calmly folding one of the flyers, smiling faintly as if she had just completed some noble duty. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice hoarse, barely controlled. She looked up, her eyes flashing with that familiar artificial warmth I'd known since childhood. "You're gone so much. It's a shame to let the house go to waste." I thought, maybe someone who really needs it should have it. I stared at her, unable to blink, too stunned to speak. No phone call, no warning, just a decision made, executed, and laid bare in front of me like it was all perfectly reasonable. "This house is mine, Mom," I said slowly. "I worked my butt off for 11 years to buy it." She shrugged as if that detail didn't matter anymore. "Property is meant to serve life. If it's not being used right, it's wasted." I wanted to respond, to push back, but my throat tightened. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, where warm yellow light spilled softly onto the hardwood floor. My dad was sitting there like he'd lived in that house his entire life, holding the ceramic mug I'd brought back from Italy, reading an old newspaper I knew he'd taken from my bookshelf. Nothing about him had changed. The way he sat, the way he avoided looking up, as if he had always belonged here. "Hey kiddo," he said without looking up. "You must be tired from your trip. There's tea on the stove." "Dad," I said carefully, "why did you and Mom move in?" He folded the paper and sighed, like he had to explain something painfully obvious. "This place is too big for someone living alone. Your mom felt sad thinking about you here by yourself. We thought it'd be better if someone else lived here too." "Better for who?" I asked, stepping closer to the dining table. "For everyone," he said gently, still not meeting my eyes. "Family should be together." I fell silent. My mind began piecing together the odd things that had happened over the past 2 weeks. The company emails bouncing back, the declined credit card at the airport, the login errors from my bank. I'd brushed them off as system glitches. But now the pattern was clear. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. Couldn't log in. Tried again. Wrong password. I hit forgot password, and the screen told me the recovery email had been changed. I opened my personal email next. Locked out. After 3 tries, the system froze the account. I turned back to my parents. They were both now standing in the kitchen, watching me quietly as if I was the one being unreasonable. "Did you change my recovery email?" I asked. "We just wanted to make sure you weren't distracted during a difficult time," my mom replied, her voice still syrupy sweet. "After that breakup, I knew your mental state wasn't stable." I was worried. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. "And the bank account?" "We needed to manage your finances temporarily so you wouldn't make impulsive decisions," my dad interjected. I stared at him. "How? You don't have the right." My mother chuckled softly, then reached into the drawer and pulled out a printed document. "You signed a temporary power of attorney last year when renewing your passport, remember? We just used that. Along with a few reports from a doctor friend of mine." I snatched the paper and skimmed it. My eyes froze on one line. "Temporary financial guardianship, valid in cases of suspected diminished capacity." I looked at her, my voice trembling. "You submitted this to the court?" She nodded without hesitation. "It's only temporary. You'll thank me once everything calms down." I couldn't hear anything after that. Just the low hum in my ears, like wind howling through a hollow space. My assets, my accounts, my house, they were all slipping out of my hands and I hadn't even noticed. And the most terrifying part? The people doing it were my own parents, smiling gently, speaking in soothing tones. I took a step back, avoiding their eyes. One question echoed in my mind. If your parents stop being your protectors and become your controllers, who can you trust? I didn't need to answer that right then. I just knew I had to get out of that kitchen, out of that house, before I did something I couldn't take back. But one thing I was certain of: I wouldn't stay silent ever again. I left the house the next morning feeling disoriented. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night sitting on the floor of my old bedroom, the place that used to be my sanctuary. Now it had been redecorated with purple floral curtains, a creaky rocking chair, and a wool rug that my mother said felt more harmonious. Every item in the house no longer felt like mine. It had been taken over, changed, and worst of all, redefined under the name of family love. I had no choice but to call Rachel. Rachel was my best friend from college. She had always been someone I could trust, someone who had helped me navigate more than a few dead-end family arguments. But this morning I wasn't calling Rachel as a friend. I needed her as a lawyer. She invited me to her office, a small but professional space in North Austin. I sat across from her, hands still shaking even though I'd tried to stay composed on the drive over. I don't even know where to start, I exhaled. Everything's happening so fast, so bizarre. Rachel nodded, pulled out her notepad and pen. Just tell me everything that's going on. No need for order. I'll help make sense of it. I told her about my parents moving in without warning, the open house my mom hosted, the locked emails, the frozen bank account, and finally the financial guardianship papers my mom printed and handed to me. Rachel paused when I mentioned the phrase, temporary guardianship. Her brow furrowed. She immediately opened her laptop, typed a few keywords, and started searching the court database. Nova, she said, her voice lowering. They really did file for temporary financial guardianship. The court approved it 11 days ago. I sat in silence for a long time. It felt like someone had yanked the chair out from under me. But how? I asked quietly. I'm fully functional. I go to work. I don't have any kind of mental health condition. Rachel turned her screen toward me and pointed at the attached document in the guardianship petition. There's a report from a psychologist named Charles Whitman. He wrote that you were showing signs of severe depression after the breakup, mild paranoia, social anxiety, and that you require financial oversight to ensure personal safety. I stared at the name, Charles Whitman. Sounded familiar. Then it hit me, he was one of Dad's old friends. He used to come by for house parties back when I was still in college. A quiet man, rarely looked me in the eye, but always asked my parents how I was coping. Rachel, I said, my voice catching, can a doctor write a psychological report on me without ever examining me? That's not proper procedure, she replied immediately. But if he clearly states that it's based on observation and family-reported behavior, the court might still consider it preliminary evidence. Especially if relatives back it up. I felt completely hollow. Everything I'd worked so hard to build was being dismantled piece by the people I called family. And then Rachel looked at me and sighed. There's something else you need to hear, she said. The person who submitted the original guardianship request, the first signature on the proposal, it wasn't your parents. I looked at her confused. Who was it? She placed a printed copy of the petition in front of me. I picked it up, my eyes drawn straight to the signature at the bottom. Brooke. I read it 3 times, hoping I had misread it. But no. Brooke. My younger sister. The one who cried in my arms for nights during her first heartbreak. The one I drained my savings for so she could pay her tuition when she dropped out mid-semester. The one I trusted with my house keys, my credit alerts, and even co-signed a small loan for 2 years ago. She wrote, Rachel continued, that she feared her sister had a tendency toward financial self-harm and was incapable of making sound decisions when emotionally unstable. The room tilted. My face burned. My chest tightened. I tried not to cry, but my fists were clenched so hard that my nails dug red marks into my palms. Why? I whispered. Rachel stayed silent for a moment. She knew I wasn't looking for a legal answer. I was asking as a sister betrayed, not as a client. Could be money. Could be jealousy. Or maybe both. I said nothing else. Part of me wanted to confront Brooke right then and there, ask her to her face how she could do this. But another part, one growing stronger by the minute, whispered, if she could do this behind my back, what else don't I know? I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes, letting the sounds of the office fade around me. Something had broken. Not just trust, but a deeper kind of safety, the belief that someone in your family would always have your back. But now that whole foundation had collapsed, and I would have to stand up inside the wreckage. On my own. Or not at all. I left Rachel's office that afternoon with a thick file folder and a weight I couldn't quite name. Betrayal was one thing. Being treated like a piece of property by people you once believed in was something else entirely. I drove home in silence, headlights passing by like they were underlining the hollowness in my chest. When I walked in the door, my parents were sitting in the living room. The TV was on, but no one was watching. Mom was knitting. Dad was reading news on a tablet. Everything looked so absurdly normal, like they were living in a world where control was disguised as care. I headed straight upstairs, intending to check my bank account again, even though I knew it was pointless. And just as I expected, the account was completely locked. But what stopped me cold was the latest alert from the bank. $62,000 has been transferred to Brooke Washington's account for unpaid tuition at Denver Institute of Cosmetology. I went numb. $62,000. That was my entire emergency savings. Part from work bonuses, the rest from setting aside a portion of every paycheck for 7 years. For a new car. For opening my own office. For unexpected health costs. It was gone. Just like that. One transfer I never approved, never even knew about. I walked downstairs slowly, forcing my voice to stay even. Mom. Dad. Why was $62,000 transferred from my account to Brooke? Dad didn't even look up. Mom answered as if I'd asked why the sky was blue. She needed help. You always said you'd look out for her. Look out for her, I echoed. Not fund her life indefinitely. That money wasn't for her. Mom set her knitting aside, met my eyes, and spoke with that measured, self-righteous tone she always used when delivering a lesson. You don't have your own family. No husband, no children. That money was just sitting there. I thought using it to support your sister made sense. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Her logic always came gift-wrapped in sugar, but inside it was all thorn. Every time I pushed back, she would guilt me with the old mantra. Sacrifice for the family. I'm not useless, I said. I have a career, a future. I'm not some ATM everyone gets to access whenever they feel like it. Career. Mom repeated, raising an eyebrow. Your father and I were actually planning to talk to you about that. We think it would be best if you took a break. You're under severe stress. Your mental health is clearly suffering. I'm perfectly fine, I bit out. You don't have the right to interfere with my work. Dad finally looked up, his voice calm, deliberate. You work in a high-pressure environment. You just went through a breakup. You live alone. Your mom was worried. We both felt it might be better if you stayed home for a while. Started fresh. I took a step back. Started fresh, meaning what? You want to keep me home, cut off my access, drain my accounts, and pretend I never existed. They didn't respond. The silence was so thick it might as well have been concrete. I picked up my phone, opened my work email, and started typing a status report to HR. But before I could finish the first sentence, my phone rang. It was the company's internal line. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Nova? This is Christy from HR. I just need to confirm something. A man named Raymond Washington called this morning. Said he was your father. He told us you're currently under financial guardianship and not fit to work. I froze. My ears started ringing. He called the company? I repeated. Yes. We had to verify with you, Christy said, because he provided some legal documents. He claimed that any current financial or work-related decision on your part needs his approval. I swallowed hard. Christy, please don't believe anything they say. This is manipulation. I'm fully capable of working. I'll send verification documents right after this call. Please, don't let them damage my record. I understand. But the board has received the information, so you need to clarify things as soon as possible. I hung up, my hands trembling. I looked over at my father, who was getting up from the chair to pour himself more tea. You called my company? Just to inform them of the situation, he said casually. You're not in a good state to make big decisions. Everyone can see that. So your solution is to sabotage my career? It's better for you to step back now before things spiral, he answered without a hint of regret. You're fighting everyone. We're just trying to keep you from ruining yourself. I don't need help like that. The only damage being done to me has been done by you. I grabbed my phone and texted Rachel, "Start emergency action. They called my company. They're destroying my reputation and finances. We need to act now." I walked upstairs, each step heavier than the last, but something in me had never been clearer. If I didn't fight now, there'd be nothing left to save. I went to see Brooke the next morning. Not to argue. Not to demand an explanation. I needed to hear it from her own mouth. I needed to know how my little sister, the one who used to sleep in the same bed as me through college, who once cried in my arms after every rushed heartbreak, who used to call me the only one who understands me, had betrayed me like this. Her apartment was on the third floor of a short-term rental complex on the west side of town, the kind of place people ended up in when they were trying to start over or waiting for bankruptcy to finalize. I knocked 3 times before she opened the door. Her face looked drained, sleepless, with makeup still smeared under her eyes. She froze. "We need to talk." She avoided my gaze but opened the door and stepped aside. The room smelled of hair dye and nail polish remover. An open pizza box from last night still sat on the table. Papers were scattered across the floor, bills, debt notices, and a few letters from the bank. I didn't sit down. I didn't trust myself to stay calm if I got too close. "What did you do with my name?" I asked directly. Brooke froze mid-pour, her hand slightly shaking. "What are you talking about?" "Bullock Spa," I said clearly. "Registered under Nova, Washington. My social security number. My signature on the loan documents. My email on the business license." She sat down slowly and sighed like she'd been waiting for this moment. "So you found out. You used my name to take out nearly $200,000. You hid everything. Then left me with a spa under investigation for scamming customers with fake service packages." She lowered her head, not even trying to deny it. "It started as a favor," she said softly. "I was going to pay it all back. I just needed to get through the first 6 months." "And where did you get the confidence to think you could run a luxury spa when you haven't even paid off your beauty school tuition?" "I had a plan," she snapped. "I had partners. A marketing strategy." "Did you even say a word to me?" I asked. "Did it ever cross your mind who would be held responsible if this blew up?" "You have everything," she blurted. "You've got the house, the title, the money. Your whole life is something everyone admires. I have nothing. I had to do something to be noticed." I stepped back. Not out of fear, but because the weight of it all knocked the wind out of me. "And your solution was to steal my identity?" "It's not stealing," she shouted. "You don't get it. I've been exhausted living in your shadow my whole life. Everyone asks about your sister Nova. Everyone compares. Every time I mess up, they say, 'Why can't you be more like your sister?' Do you know how much I hate that sentence?" I looked at her. I couldn't see the girl who used to stay up with me all night studying. The one who once wrote me a handwritten apology after losing my wallet on a trip. The one who used to look at me like I was her whole world. "I never asked you to be like me," I said quietly. "I did everything I could to help you feel enough. I paid your tuition. I shielded you from mom and dad. I used my name to get you interviews at places you couldn't even step into alone. And this is what you did with that." "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "When you forged my signature on the loan, when you wired money from my account to pay for advertising, when you told customers the spa owner was on retreat to dodge accountability, did you still think you had no choice?" I opened my bag and pulled out the folder Rachel had prepared. Copies of the business registration, bank statements, credit card bills. Every transaction Brooke made under my name. Everything you did left a trail. And now I'm the one cleaning it up. Brooke bit her lip. Her eyes shifted from defiant to panicked. "Are you going to press charges?" I didn't answer immediately. I looked around the apartment, looked at her, exhausted, depleted, but still clinging to something twisted I hadn't noticed before. "I don't know yet," I said, my voice calm like the still air before a thunderstorm. "But I'll do whatever I have to in order to protect myself. No matter who it hurts." "You're so cold." No, I said, locking eyes with her. You're the one who's cold. You treated trust like an interest-free loan. You turned my name into a label on something rotting from the inside. Brooke didn't respond. She just sat there, surrounded by a sea of papers, and I turned away without looking back. Out in the car, I exhaled like something heavy had finally lifted off my chest. For years, I believed that family was the one place where betrayal didn't exist. But maybe, it's just that we refuse to see the signs until they're screaming at us. I sat alone in a small hotel room near downtown, the glow of my laptop screen the only thing softening the dimness. Outside, the noise of traffic hummed against the glass. I wasn't devastated anymore. I was sharply, strangely clear. No more tears. No more "why me?" I knew now that I couldn't rescue this family the way I had hoped. I opened my laptop and created a new folder titled, The Truth. Every audio file, every email, every screenshot of messages. I added them carefully. Rachel had walked me through the steps like I was preparing for war, not filing a lawsuit. She had said, "This isn't about emotion anymore. This is a legal battle. You need evidence like you're facing a multinational corporation, not your parents." I double-checked the security camera footage from the house before my access had been revoked. Thankfully, the temp files were still intact. I extracted clips of my mother showing strangers around while I was gone, my father telling a realtor that the homeowner is away on an extended trip and has authorized the family to handle everything. Those videos, every second, every frame, felt like a blade slicing through the carefully crafted illusion they'd wrapped around me all my life. I also retrieved my medical records. My primary therapist, Dr. Esther Lynch, had been monitoring my mental health for the past 3 years. Ever since that breakup. I scheduled a meeting with her on a rainy afternoon at her old clinic near Zilker Park. She welcomed me with a gentle hug and led me into the familiar counseling room. "I've heard," she said, resting her hands on the table as if to offer me something steady to hold on to. "And I'm so sorry this is happening to you. I need you to confirm it clearly," I said, my voice low but firm. "I've never been diagnosed with diminished capacity. I don't have self-harming tendencies. And you've never had any reason to suggest I needed guardianship. Is that correct?" She nodded. "I'll sign any affidavit you need me to. Not just because of medical ethics but because I know you. You're not perfect but you're fully capable. And you've never turned to your family as a means of control." I squeezed her hand, tears spilling, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. That night back at the hotel, I reopened my old blog. Abandoned for over a year. It used to be a space where I shared stories about interior design, about balancing work and life. I once had thousands of followers. But life had swept me away and the blog became a time capsule of who I used to be. I wrote a new post. Not to vent, not to complain, just to breathe out what had been stuck in my chest for far too long. I didn't use my real name. I simply signed NW and titled the post, "When My Girlfriend Lost Control of Her Life, at the Hands of Her Own Family." I wrote about a woman whose family quietly filed for guardianship using a fabricated psychological report, about her money being taken without warning, about her home being listed for sale while she was away on business, about the manipulation masked as love. I didn't name anyone. I didn't accuse directly. But the emotion was so real that even I had to pause several times as I typed. I hit publish just before 2 a.m. In less than 12 hours, the post had been shared over 5,000 times. Supportive messages poured into the blog's inbox. A woman from California wrote, "My brother once used my name to take out loans and disappeared. Thank you for speaking up." A man from Minnesota said, "Family has no right to destroy you in the name of love." I sat quietly in that little room watching the comments flood in like a steady stream. The truth was spreading without me having to shout. And for the first time during all of this, I didn't feel ashamed. I was no longer the child who stayed silent when my mother scolded me in public for a math mistake. No longer the teenager who bowed her head every time my father sighed and said, "I'm disappointed in you." No longer the older sister who tried so hard to protect her sibling, she didn't realize she was being drained. I had come back. Not to apologize, but to reclaim everything that was mine. I didn't know how far my blog post had spread until I received an email from the production team of a popular podcast that covers legal battles within families. The subject line was simple: Your story is making waves. We'd like to invite you. I read that email over and over, my heart pounding slowly but heavily. They wanted me on the air. They wanted me to tell the story from my point of view, with nothing hidden. Rachel advised me to think carefully. Once you go public, you can't take your privacy back. But if you're ready, this is a chance to have your truth heard on a bigger scale. It took me 2 days to decide. And in the end, I said yes. We recorded in a small studio downtown Austin. The host was a woman in her 40s with a calm, empathetic voice that didn't feel performative. You can use your real name or a pseudonym, she said as I put on the headphones. We'll respect your boundaries. My name is Nova, I replied. And I have nothing left to hide. I told everything. The guardianship, the house takeover, the bank accounts seized, the fraudulent loan in my name. I made it clear this wasn't a story of resentment. It was a story about boundaries. About what happens when you have to protect yourself, even if the person you're protecting yourself from calls themselves your parent. Less than 2 days after the episode aired, my inbox nearly crashed. Messages from listeners, from people who'd lived through something similar, from attorneys, therapists, and even people who used to think, this only happens in movies, now waking up. Then I got a message that left me frozen for minutes. It was from Laura Moreno, former senior creative director at my old company. She wrote, Nova, I heard the podcast this morning. I can't believe this happened to you. I just left the company to start my own studio. If you're not locked into anything yet, I'd love to bring you on as a freelance creative consultant. Flexible schedule. Transparent pay. Full control in your hands. I held the phone for a long time, unsure whether to type a reply or just stare. I'd thought my career was over after that HR call. But maybe, in the darkness, opportunity was lighting up from places I never expected. I called Laura back, my voice cautious but no longer afraid. I'm still dealing with fallout from my family, I admitted. I don't know when it'll be over. I don't need explanations, she said gently. I need talent. And I believe you still have every bit of it. That afternoon, Rachel and I went to the Travis County Courthouse. I filed a petition to revoke the financial guardianship my parents had gained, attaching the thick stack of evidence we'd gathered over the past week. Dr. Esther's statement, bank records, camera footage, screenshots of family emails, and a detailed breakdown of suspicious transactions from my account to Brooks. I also filed a civil suit with 3 main claims: personal property violation, identity misuse, and invasion of privacy. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing for early next month. As Rachel placed her hand on my shoulder outside the courthouse, her eyes no longer looked like just those of a lawyer. She was a friend now. An ally. You've officially entered the public fight, she said. From here on out, they'll realize you're not the silent child anymore. I stood on the courthouse steps, the wind brushing over my shoulders. In my hands was nothing but paperwork and a phone vibrating with notifications. But inside me was something more powerful than any document. A resolve that I would never again be drowned out by anyone, even those who once called me blood. I entered the courtroom with ice-cold hands but a calm heart. Weeks had passed since I filed the lawsuit, and today was the key hearing to determine whether the financial guardianship would remain in effect. My parents sat across from me. Dad wore an old dark suit, eyes averted. Mom still wore that prim, practiced expression, clutching her handbag like it held the last remnants of her power. Rachel sat beside me, composed, sharp, flipping through the file like she was handling a corporate case, not a family matter. When the judge asked for a statement, she stood up, voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, my client Nova Washington is fully capable, legally and mentally, of managing her own finances, her career, and her life. We present documentation from her treating physician, security footage showing Mr. and Mrs. Raymond and Shirley Washington trespassing and using her private property, and evidence of financial transactions conducted using her identity without consent. I looked directly at the judge when it was my turn to speak. I didn't beg. I told the truth. With a voice calm to the point of coldness, I laid out the details. Being locked out of my accounts, my sister's fraudulent loan, my house being listed on Craigslist while I was away. I didn't use the word hurt. I used the word violated. My mother stood up, trying to keep her tone sweet in front of the court. She said everything stemmed from concern. That I was clearly unwell after the breakup. That she only did what was necessary to protect her daughter from herself. I felt a chill go down my spine. Even when exposed, she clung to a performance no one was buying anymore. The judge spent nearly an hour reviewing the file, examining each piece of evidence, asking about every detail. When he finally set the documents down and paused in silence, I realized my hands had turned pale from how tightly I was gripping them. Based on the evidence provided, he said, the court hereby revokes the temporary financial guardianship of Ms. Nova Washington. All accounts and personal assets are to be returned to their original state, including any funds spent without the consent of the party involved. I heard every word like a tide pulling the weight out of my chest. The judge continued, his tone unchanged. Additionally, the file includes documentation of a loan taken out under Ms. Washington's name, used for business purposes by an unauthorized third party. The court orders Mr. and Mrs. Washington and Ms. Brooke Washington to repay the full principal and any accrued interest within 90 days. My mother covered her mouth, eyes wide. My father lowered his head as if something in him had collapsed. Brooke wasn't present that day. Maybe she already knew how this would end. After the hearing, Rachel pulled me aside, her expression serious. Nova, there's something you need to know right away. She opened her laptop and searched through a batch of supplemental records her firm had been combing through. While checking transactions under your name prior to your 26th birthday, we found a property that once belonged to you, a small house in San Marcos. It was transferred by Mr. Raymond Washington when you were 17. But last year he sold that property and deposited the income into his personal account, without notifying you. I stood frozen. That property was in my name? It's all documented, Rachel nodded. That house was left to you by your grandparents. But since you were underage, your father was assigned as temporary custodian. Legally, he was required to transfer ownership to you once you came of age. But that never happened. And the sale without your consent is a legal violation. It could even be prosecuted as a criminal offense. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Shock? Or just complete exhaustion? I remembered my dad talking about early retirement, saying he needed a quiet place to rest. So that quiet had been bought with something that was never his. Rachel placed her hand on my shoulder. Nova, you have every right to take this to criminal court. But I'll leave that decision up to you. This isn't just a financial case anymore. This is long-term betrayal of trust. I looked through the courthouse hallway window. The sky had gone gray, hinting at an approaching storm. But inside me the clouds were starting to lift. I had reclaimed my home, my autonomy, myself. And now, maybe it was time to reclaim the last truth they tried to bury under sacred labels. The final hearing didn't last long, but the atmosphere in the courtroom was thick, like a summer downpour falling without warning. My father sat silently the whole time, head down, visibly aged in just a few weeks. My mother, however, was different. She sat straight-backed, eyes locked on mine, as if waiting for the slightest moment of weakness to seize back everything I had fought for. When the judge finished reading the ruling for permanent no contact, requiring any future communication from my parents to go through legal representatives or have my written permission, my mother suddenly stood up. The composure she had worn throughout the case shattered like glass at her feet. "You're really going to leave your parents with nothing?" she shouted. "We're family. What kind of daughter is this ungrateful?" The courtroom fell silent. Even the court clerk paused, unsure how to proceed. My father still didn't lift his head. Only my mother's voice rang out, shaky, furious. "Everything we did was for you. Don't you see that? Because of you, I've lost friends, lost my reputation. How am I supposed to live after this?" I stood, back straight, heart steady. No more tears. No more trembling. "The reputation you lost came from the false story you built to hide the truth," I said. "Your friends turned away, not because of what I said but because of what you did. You chose to deceive me instead of love me. And today, I'm not choosing blind gratitude anymore. I'm choosing to love myself." She froze. Maybe she never imagined I could speak like that. For years I'd been the obedient daughter, the quiet child who bowed her head whenever she was scolded. The daughter easily manipulated with lines like, "I'm only trying to protect you," or "Don't break your mother's heart." But that girl no longer existed. My father shifted slightly. For the first time that morning he looked up, His eyes were blurry with exhaustion, as if between us stood not just a legal fight but a wordless shame. Yet he said nothing. No justification. No apology. Not a single explanation. And somehow that hurt more than all my mother's yelling. Their attorney quickly pulled my mother back into her seat, trying to maintain order. But she kept staring at me, her eyes full of pain distorted into fury. In her mind, I was probably a traitorous daughter. But in mine, she was a mother who traded love for power. Outside the courtroom, the air felt lighter. Rachel slipped a stamped copy of the ruling into my hand, her expression soft after weeks of tension. "It's all settled," she said gently. "Now it's up to you what comes next." I nodded. But before leaving the courthouse, I received a text. It was from an unlisted number displaying only this: "I've been summoned for next week. If you could withdraw the suit. I'm scared of being prosecuted. I'm sorry. Brooke." I reread the message, hands steady, a light breeze brushing my sleeve. Not because I forgave her, but because I had crossed the most painful line, the one where trust turns into awakening. I replied with a single sentence: "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to yourself." I turned off my phone, slipped the documents into my bag, and walked across the courthouse lobby bathed in midday sunlight. My steps tapped against the cool stone floor, measured, unhurried. And with each one, I moved further from what I used to think was family. I didn't know how they would live after all this. But I knew that from now on, I would live without asking anyone for permission to be myself. 6 months passed since the day I left the courthouse with that decision in hand. 6 months. Enough time for wounds to begin healing. Enough time to understand that pain can't be erased, but it can be lived with, without letting it lead the way. I returned to my house. This time truly mine. No more purple floral curtains. No more slippers shuffling into the kitchen at dawn. No more watchful eyes or sugar-coated voices that pierced too deep. Just me, the morning light, and the scent of new wood from the shelves I'd installed myself. I repainted the entire home just the way I wanted. The living room walls were now a soothing olive green. The kitchen had been opened up, sunlight pouring through tall glass windows. My workspace upstairs was redesigned with a walnut desk, deep brown leather chair, and a full wall of bookshelves. It was the space I had always dreamed of when I had to live surrounded by things my mother said were more appropriate. Work changed too. Rachel and I officially started our own company, consulting in interior design with a focus on therapeutic space psychology. The idea came from my journey, that a house isn't just shelter but healing. We named the company Vera, from the Latin word for true. A space to return to your truest self. Rachel remained her sharp, no-nonsense self, but with a warm, deeply loyal heart. She was more than a business partner, she was the person I was most grateful for. And she was the one who nudged me to meet Dylan, the man who taught me how to trust again without fear. Dylan was a lighting engineer for art installations. Quiet, patient, always asking the right questions without pushing for answers. He showed up not with promises but with presence. With weekend afternoons fixing the garden lights. With lasagna made from his mom's recipe. The only woman, start to finish, who had always respected my space. Tonight I was hosting a small backyard dinner. Under soft golden lights strung between 2 cherry trees, the table was simply but warmly set. Rachel came early with my favorite salad. Dylan manned the grill, flipping each cut of meat like it was an art piece. And my 2 former co-workers, Maya and Jordan, arrived laughing with a bottle of red wine in hand. We gathered around the table talking about new projects, picky clients, and the kind of dramatic meetings that somehow always end in laughter. I didn't mention my family. No one asked. They understood, and I was grateful for that. In the middle of the conversation, my phone buzzed softly. A message popped up from a number I knew well but hadn't seen in a long time. My mother. "We're still family. At the very least, we should learn how to forgive." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. There was no surge of anger, no bitterness. Just a faint wave of regret. For what could have been if only people knew when to stop before things went too far. I set the phone down on the wooden table, screen facing down. Gave a small smile. Dylan handed me a glass of wine, his eyes holding a silent question before his hand gently found mine under the table. Rachel leaned over to refill my glass, her eyes shimmering beneath the string lights. Maya was in the middle of telling a story about getting lost at the Grand Canyon because she trusted Google Maps too much. Jordan was nearly choking with laughter when Maya got to the part about turning back into a whole group of bears. I sat among them, my heart light as the early spring breeze. For a long time, I believed family was something you had to hold on to no matter how much it hurt. But now I understood. Family isn't who you share blood with. Family is who listens, who respects, and who never uses love as a weapon for control. I no longer live in fear of being abandoned just because I say no. I no longer feel guilty for setting boundaries. I've learned that love does not mean losing yourself. And maybe the biggest lesson I've ever learned is this: if you can't find healthy love in the place you were born, you have every right to build your own home. A place strong enough to lift your chin, warm enough to let you breathe, and deep enough to call by its true name: peace. I don't know what it's been like for you, but for me, this journey hasn't just been about reclaiming a house, money, or dignity. It's been about reclaiming my voice. Maybe you've also been in a situation where the line between love and control got blurry, where silence felt like the only way to keep the peace. If so, I hope this story reminds you, you have the right to say, enough. And you have the right to begin again on your own terms. I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Have you gone through something similar? What would you do? Could you forgive? Share your story with me in the comments below. Every story you share could be the strength someone out there needs right now. And if you'd like to hear more real, raw, deeply human stories like this, about family, about loss, about healing, and the love we rediscover in the most unexpected places, make sure to follow this channel. Because maybe someday the story you're living will find its voice right here too. Thank you for listening, from beginning to end. I'll see you in the next story.